We often think of ancient epics as just these grand stories, right? Tales of heroes and villains.
Hmm.
But what if they're actually more? Like maybe these incredible mythic mirrors of the psyche really reflecting our deepest inner journeys and posing some pretty profound theological questions, too.
That's exactly why they stick around, isn't it? They tap into something really fundamental about being human.
Yeah.
And today, we're taking a deep dive into one of the giants, the Ramayana.
Absolutely. And you shared some fascinating material. We're going to explore the theological side of the Ramayana today, specifically looking at Rama and comparing him with Jesus, both divine figures who became human.
Right, that core paradox.
It's about trying to understand that incredible paradox, the divine becoming human, living a human life.
And to really dig into this, we'll be looking at the Ramayana through two different, but I think quite complementary lenses. First, Jungian depth psychology.
Okay.
And then, shifting gears a bit, the challenging theology of Søren Kierkegaard.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to grapple with that central question. How can the divine become human? By looking at Rama, this divine figure living a very, human life, what can the Ramayana maybe reveal about our own inner journeys towards, wholeness? Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that Jungian perspective on the Ramayana.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is thinking about the Ramayana not just as a religious epic, but also kind of like a map of your inner world.
A map.
Yeah, from a Jungian angle, Rama's whole journey, you can see it as a profound psychological process. It's the journey of the self striving for individuation,
Right.
for wholeness.
Okay, so tell us more about Rama in that context. How does Jungian psychology see him relating to maybe our own development?
Well, early on, Rama is presented as this ideal figure, right? A noble prince, divine origin, Vishnu incarnate, as the sources say.
Right.
But crucially, even with that divine spark, he's in the human realm. He faces suffering, exile, all sorts of trials. So in Jungian terms, Rama can represent the ego, your center of consciousness, but also that emerging self, that deeper archetype of order and meaning we're all sort of reaching for.
The emerging self. Okay, so even though he seems perfect on the outside, his journey is about becoming fully realized, kind of like our own growth.
Exactly. It's not just about fulfilling his dharma, his duty, the cosmic order he upholds. It's also about integrating parts of himself, confronting what the sources call internal and external darker forces.
Right.
And that exile, that big event early on, through this lens, it's the call to adventure, that disruption that kicks off this huge transformation, just like those moments in our own lives,
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like life throwing you a curveball so you find out what you're made of. Now, what about Sita? She's so central. How does Jungian psychology see her role, especially maybe in the male psyche?
Okay, Sita. She's typically viewed as the anima.
The Anna.
Yeah, the feminine soul image within the male psyche. She embodies things like beauty, love, purity, those qualities. Her abduction by Ravana isn't just, a plot twist. It's symbolic. It represents a profound psychic loss, the soul kind of descending into shadow, getting separated from that inner wholeness Rama is seeking.
Wow, a psychic loss, like losing a part of yourself.
Exactly. So for anyone listening, thinking about Sita as the anima helps recognize those vital feminine aspects within creativity, intuition, and how losing touch with them can really impact your balance.
So Rama's quest to get her back, it's an inner journey too, reclaiming those parts of himself.
Precisely. It's the journey to reclaim the inner feminine, those vital aspects of feeling, creativity, intuition. Jung himself said, and the sources quote this, the anima is the archetype of life itself.
Life itself.
So Sita isn't just Rama's wife. She represents that inner vitality, the muse, that deep wellspring of memory and longing inside.
Okay, so Sita's the soul image. Her abduction is this inner loss. What about the villain, Ravana? He's this huge, powerful, almost demonic figure. How does he fit into this Jungian picture? Does he represent things we don't like in ourselves?
Ravana is, the perfect embodiment of the shadow.
The shadow.
Yeah, that part of your psyche you push down, fear, deny.
Yeah.
But it's really important to get this. In Jungian thought, the shadow isn't just evil.
Right.
It's necessary.
Yeah.
Often uncomfortable, sure, but part of us. The sources actually point out Ravana wasn't just bad. He was brilliant, a scholar, a devotee of Shiva. He even mirrors some of Rama's traits. Just, unbalanced by ego, by lust.
So not just a simple monster, but maybe a distorted reflection of Rama. Makes you think about the darkness even in seemingly good people.
Exactly. And this is key to consider for yourself. Jung famously said something like, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious.
Making the darkness conscious.
Yeah. So Rama's battle with Ravana, killing the demon king symbolically, it's about confronting and integrating those disowned parts of the self, the pride, the ambition, the lust. And doing that leads to reclaiming the anima, Sita.
That's a powerful idea. Facing your own darkness to become whole. Now, Hanuman, the loyal monkey god, he's so crucial in helping Rama. What does he represent psychologically, this force of devotion and courage?
Hanuman is the archetype of the inner hero, or maybe the divine helper, that force that resides within you.
Okay.
He symbolizes devotion, courage, that unwavering faith that helps you on your own quests. Psychologically, he's like the awakening of your inner strength. Realizing you're not alone, that support can come from, well, unexpected places inside.
The inner hero, I like that. It resonates. It's that part of us that can somehow leap over huge obstacles, just like Hanuman leaping the ocean.
Precisely. And the sources also connect Hanuman to prana, that vital life energy, and the breath, that bridge between body and spirit.
Ah, interesting.
Even his monkey nature is seen as representing that sort of primal unconscious energy, but channeled, directed towards a real purpose.
That's fascinating. Okay, so after the battle, we get Sita's trial by fire, the Agni Pariksha. That part's often controversial, isn't it?
It definitely is. Raises a lot of questions.
Yeah. How does Jungian psychology look at that, especially thinking about the challenges and transformations we face?
Well, from a Jungian view, the Agni Pariksha isn't just a literal test of Sita's purity. It's seen as a deeper ritual, a ritual of psychological integration.
Integration, how so?
Fire is the classic element of transformation, right? So it becomes the agent through which the anima, Sita, is sort of reintegrated with the self, Rama. But not without going through this intense trial. It can be seen as representing the kind of scrutiny and purification the soul undergoes during deep psychological change.
So it's about the soul, or maybe our inner self, being willing to endure something really intense for the sake of becoming whole again. Like the tough changes we sometimes have to face.
Exactly that. The individuation process, becoming whole, it isn't always smooth sailing. It often means facing hard truths, undergoing significant shifts. Sita's ordeal kind of symbolizes the soul's willingness to endure suffering for unity, for transformation.
And then finally, Rama's return to Ayodhya, his coronation. That signals the achievement of this inner wholeness, the integration of all these parts.
Yes, exactly. It's not just getting his kingdom back, it's a return with psychic balance. He's faced his shadow, Ravana, reclaimed his anima, Sita, integrated the helper, Hanuman. Now Rama stands as a more individuated self.
Right.
Jung himself said, and the sources quote this again, individuation means becoming a single homogeneous being. It also implies becoming one's own self. So the Ramayana, through this lens, becomes this powerful metaphor for our own deep longing for unity, for wholeness, for meaning.
It's really incredible how this ancient story can speak to such, well, timeless psychological truths, reflecting that inner landscape we all navigate. Okay, so we've looked at the Ramayana as this deep journey of the soul. Now let's shift gears, like you said, and dive into the theological side. Comparing Rama with another divine figure who became human, Jesus Christ, and using Søren Kierkegaard's thought to help us navigate this.
Yes, and what's really striking here is that shared theme. Divine figures entering the human condition. And the inherent paradox that creates both Rama and Jesus embody this profoundly, but in really distinct ways that I think are compelling to explore.
Let's start with Rama then, in this theological context. How is his divinity shown? And where do we see that paradox of his human experience, a god living with human limits and struggles?
Rama is presented as Vishnu's seventh avatar, right? Born specifically to fight evil, restore dharma righteousness. He is the image of it, as the sources say.
Yeah.
Yet he's also shown as a man experiencing the full spectrum of human suffering, grief, doubt, and he acts within human limitations.
And there are those specific moments in the story that really highlight this tension, aren't there? Like his exile.
Exactly. When he's exiled because of, palace politics, his reaction isn't blind fury, it's accepting his duty. He famously says, Father's command must be obeyed, I shall fulfill his promise.
Right.
He willingly takes on this human constraint, this hardship. But then you get these other moments, like the trial by fire for Sita, and later his banishment of her to satisfy public opinion. These actions often make us pause and ask, how can a divine being act in ways that seem so, humanly flawed? Maybe even harsh.
That really is the core of the paradox, isn't it? This divine being making choices that seem to clash with that divinity. It raises big questions about how divine action works in the human world.
Precisely. He has divine knowledge as an avatar, Yet he chooses to operate within the rules of human law, social order. He's a God who, in a way, hides his godhood, a king choosing suffering over personal happiness.
Okay, now let's contrast that with Jesus. How does the paradox of his human divine nature show up in Christian theology? What are the key differences or maybe similarities?
Now, in Christian tradition, Jesus is the Logos made flesh, the eternal Word entering time, as John the Gospel puts it, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Okay.
Unlike Rama, who often keeps this sort of aura of divine power, Jesus' divinity is frequently veiled in what the sources call radical humility.
Radical humility.
Yeah, think about it. Birth in a manger, living among ordinary people, and finally execution as a criminal. These all point to this profound self-emptying. Theologians call it kenosis.
Kenosis.
Yeah.
Self-emptying. That's a powerful contrast to Rama's more obvious divinity. It suggests a really different way for the divine to enter the human experience.
It really is. Paul's letter to the Philippians captures it beautifully, and the sources quote it. Though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, being born in the likeness of men. Jesus' ultimate paradox is really on the cross, the all-powerful God experiencing suffering and death. That cry, my God, why have you forsaken me? It highlights this intense human experience of abandonment, even within his divinity.
Wow.
And while Rama's actions are often about restoring order, Jesus' obedience in Christian theology leads to this promise of universal salvation.
So two figures, both divine, both experiencing humanity deeply, but with different ways of showing that paradox, and maybe different ultimate goals. This is where Kierkegaard fits in, right? How does his philosophy help us understand this tension that seems impossible to resolve logically?
Kierkegaard was really grappling with that tension between reason and faith. He introduced this idea of the absolute paradox, the eternal, infinite God becoming a temporal, finite human being.
The absolute paradox.
Yeah. He wrote, and the sources quote this, the paradox is that the eternal truth has come into existence in time, that God has come into existence as an individual human being. For Kierkegaard, this isn't something you solve with your intellect.
Right.
It's a reality you have to embrace through a leap of faith.
A leap of faith, because it just defies logical explanation. It demands something else from us.
Exactly. And we can see echoes of this in both Rama and Christ, though maybe in different ways. With Rama, his divine origin is generally accepted in the story, but his actions, the suffering he endures, and sometimes causes, despite being divine, create this paradoxical tension. With Christ, the paradox is perhaps more about the hiddenness of his divinity. It requires belief that this seemingly ordinary man is the Son of God.
The sources suggested Kierkegaard might see Rama as a kind of knight of ethical heroism and Christ as the knight of faith. Can you unpack that a bit? What does that distinction mean?
Well, Kierkegaard used the story of Abraham being willing to sacrifice Isaac as the ultimate example of the knight of faith, someone acting purely on faith in something that seems absurd, going beyond normal reason and ethics.
Okay.
Rama, with his unwavering focus on dharma, on duty, even when it causes him personal pain or seems ethically questionable to us, embodies a kind of ethical heroism. He sticks to the code.
Right.
Jesus, especially in embracing the suffering of the cross, echoing his prayer in Gethsemane, not my will, but yours be done, really embodies that leap of faith, that submission to a higher, often incomprehensible divine will.
So both show a willingness to suffer, a kind of sacrifice, but maybe for different reasons and driven by different principles.
Exactly. Rama's sacrifice is often seen aimed at maintaining cosmic and social order, the purity of his kingship. Christ's sacrifice is understood as being for the salvation of all humanity, disrupting the old order with grace and love. And, as the sources point out, both figures leave us with interpretive challenges. Rama's actions can feel distant, maybe even cruel sometimes. Christ's demands on faith can feel immense.
And Kierkegaard's view helps us see that these aren't necessarily problems to be solved intellectually, but inherent tensions when the divine meets the human. Tensions that demand something more from us.
Precisely. He'd argue these paradoxes aren't meant to be smoothed over by reason. They're like existential mirrors, forcing us to confront the limits of our understanding and the necessity of faith in dealing with the relationship between the human and the divine.
This has been such a rich exploration looking at the Ramayana through these two, well, very different but really illuminating lenses. So just to kind of wrap up, what are the key takeaways we've gained from this deep dive into Rama, Christ, and that paradox of their human-divine experience?
I think, ultimately, both the Jungian and Kierkegaardian views really zero in on this central paradox of the divine entering the human world. The Ramayana, like other sacred texts, shows itself to be more than just a story. It's a kind of spiritual map of the soul's journey, as the sources nicely put it.
Yeah.
Through the Jungian lens, you see Rama's journey as a powerful metaphor for your own inner quest for wholeness, grappling with the shadow, integrating the anima, striving towards becoming fully yourself.
And through Kierkegaard, we really confront that inherent paradox in these divine figures taking on human limits. Their actions often defying easy explanation, demanding a different kind of engagement from us, maybe even that leap of faith to grasp their meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We see these fundamental tensions played out. Suffering versus love, duty versus compassion, reason versus faith. And both Rama and Christ, each in their own unique way, embody these tensions for us to reflect on.
So as we finish this deep dive, what's that final, maybe provocative thought you'd like to leave everyone mulling over, something to consider in their own lives?
Maybe it's this, that understanding figures like Rama and Christ isn't necessarily about resolving the paradoxes they represent, but maybe about embracing them. Perhaps this very tension between the divine and the human, the eternal and the temporary, isn't a problem to be fixed, but actually a core part of the human spiritual experience itself, a key to our ongoing search for meaning and wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, just maybe, reflecting on these ancient stories can help each of us better understand the shape of our own inner epic and where the divine might be intersecting with our own human journey right now.